Ladies and gentlemen,
Well,
welcome to Terminus Live. Now that I have remembered to unmute my microphone, which I will never get good at because we don't do this long enough. Terminus Live in collaboration
that's
with...
how I feel about sex.
Yeah, pretty much. God damn, dude. Every time.
Yeah. Yeah. What are you supposed to do in 3 seconds?
I don't fucking know. I only know 2 moves, and it's boob suck and stick it in.
Mm.
So today
So,
today we've got a little bit of a weird thing we're doing. So we've been doing other forms of content on the channel, but we've never really streamed about them so much. So here's a way to I don't know, I suppose bridge the gap with some stuff that people have seemed to be pretty interested in, and that has drawn a lot of new people to the show. If any of you are people that have started listening as a result of my work on Peter Sotos with the Balaclava book series, thanks a lot for joining, and I'm glad that you guys have stuck around. So hopefully I can not make an ass of myself when I'm speaking extemporaneously instead of from a script.
yeah, feel free to immediately out yourselves in the comments.
Yeah, definitely, man.
Anyway, yeah, basically, let's start with this question, because I'm not sure I know the answer to it. Death Metal Guy, what is Balaclava Books? I mean, I think I know it's a name you've given to some of your fiction reviews, and it started off Terminus. Is that correct?
Well, so Balaclava Books is just the title that I'm giving, like, my series on books here on Terminus. And then I have my Substack called Hideous Recollection, where there's some kind of related content, but stuff that's, like, generally not music related, and is almost all just straight writing. So I wanted to link it to Terminus, but I wanted it to be slightly separate just because, the center of gravity is very different there. It's mostly about books and literature and writing and stuff. So I like having the episodes of those complete pieces available on Terminus, but I don't want them to become, like, the primary thing about the podcast. So I segregate it just a little bit, but it's, like, pretty clear people can get from one to the other.
Well, it's fun to create titles for things, and yeah, it does have since it has that vital link to your Substack work, this does make sense. It's also just fun, right? It's like having a side project.
We have shows. We've got multiple shows in the show.
I mean, I guess we have shows on the show that, oh my God, we've crossed that Rubicon.
We're a network.
The Terminus Extreme Podcasting Network.
Yes, exactly.
Maybe we should just change the name to Terminus Extreme Podcasting. That would be funny.
Well, we have talked about that for a year and a half, so about changing it to something.
Yeah, that's true. I also kind of like keeping the old name, even if it eventually has nothing to do with what we review on the channel. It is kind of a funny name.
Yeah.
It'll turn into like a book reviews, video game reviews of like cheap Chinese electronics.
Ooh, yeah, like Tiger handhelds and shit. Yeah, no. I do like the idea of being able to kind of segregate these things into different series, so people can kind of pick and choose the content that they're interested in.
All right. Well, maybe I'll start thinking of a cool name for my own series.
There you go. Do it, man. Do some spurg out pagan historical analysis stuff.
Pagan historical analysis. Yeah, it's I think if I get to a solo episode this year, it'll probably be the long prophesied neofolk review.
Oh yeah,
neofolk compendium. So Yeah, maybe, but yes, for something that's like very non-musical, I'll think about that. So series titles are fun. And I think the reason I wanted to address it more is so that people know you have more plans for this, basically, right?
Yeah.
It's a show within a show. So you've already, I also know that you've got reviews of these things that you've written and shown me going back a number of years. You've got a bunch of other transgressive literature under your belt, and also things that are on your to-do list. So basically, you want this to be not just like a one-off series on Sotos, but you want the Balaclava books thing to be an ongoing, self-contained capsule. Basically, is that fair?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
So, yeah, Balaclava Books is just it. I've happened to do these first 3 episodes on Sotos, and I plan to continue.
Sure. Well,
Yeah. I plan to continue with my work on Sotos, but there's also a lot of other books that I want to talk about. And actually, the next one I'm going to do for this series is not going to be Sotos, but it will definitely still be operating in the like transgressive experimental milieu. And there's even some stuff that I have earmarked that is not necessarily transgressive fiction, but are obscure books that I think are truly great, and at the very least, kind of experimental and out of step with their genre in a pleasant way, and generally that have some sort of greater philosophical significance that I at least perceive in them.
cool. So, do you want to tease any upcoming potential titles?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the first one, I've already kind of...
It doesn't have to. You don't have to commit to this. Also,
well, yeah,
right?
no, I know, but I've already had one planned for a while. So the next episode is going to be on New Juche's Mountainhead, which is a book that I truly love that made a big splash when it came out a few years ago in kind of transgressive and experimental circles. And he's just an author that I've really fallen in love with. And I think that'll be great for the people that are interested in the stuff on Sotos, because he is an author who, at first blush, resembles Sotos in some of the things that he covers, but his style of writing and the emotional core of it is radically different. So I think that it's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Yeah. You've been talking about New Juche on Discord for a while. Is that how you say it, New Juche, or do you say New Juche, like the gooch?
I think it's Juche. I think that's how they pronounce it in North Korea.
Or New Juche.
New Juche.
Yeah, yeah. When I get drunk enough, I say that the media is controlled by the Juche. Anyway. So next. Also, wait. I did see a comment from Disgorging asking about. Yes, the new ideas will be presented on this platform.
Yeah, this is definitely like
absolutely.
this is the podcast platform. This is where we're going to do any sort of like audio content is going to be posted here, and then simply because it makes more sense, I go to Substack for my written work.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So, basically, we're not going to make you. The death metal guy would never make you subscribe to a separate service. We are opposed to enshittification.
Actually, a bunch of them do. I'm double dipping on people's money on Substack. So.
Never mind, you're right. He is. Okay. But that's for the foot picks. I mean,
yeah, that's true. Yeah, these little piggies won't manicure themselves.
Next, let's just talk about your history with Sotos. It's something that you said you first found his stuff in your late teens, right? So before I met you.
Yeah, it's hard to remember. It was probably sometime in my late high school or early first time at college years. So probably around 17, 18, somewhere around there.
Oh, okay, so let me get to my other framing aspect of that then. So okay, so like in your at the start of this series in in the sort of nested introductions you did for Pure, which was very cool. Like, I mean, you had to introduce the series, you had to introduce Sodos, you had to introduce Pure. It was
Yeah,
like
it's three
and you
fucking
did
intros.
that's how it works, man. When you're attempting something like really ambitious, you have to kind of do the Matryoshka doll thing,
Yeah.
or the Bathory thing with the intro to the intro. You did it very well, and it never felt redundant or taxing
Oh,
to get
thanks.
through. Um, so when you were going through that material, you talked about a difference between encountering Sotos now through the lens of um, hypermediation, right? There's always somebody curating and or reviewing to send you to it or tell you not to go to it, and then you go to it anyway.
Yeah.
In addition to all the slop that just wants to give you a substitute for the actual experience, right? Say, not even to mention that, right? There's now lists. You can now go on like, it's the equivalent of the rate your music lists.
Mm-hmm.
So you said you found it in a less, a more immediate, less contrived way. But on the other hand, this isn't exactly material you find by accident. So what is it that like led you let how do you come into contact with Sotos in the first place?
So I can't recall exactly where I saw it, but as a teenager, I was already looking at and involved with a lot of just very weird spaces on the internet. I was, I wasn't really a 4chan poster, but I would lurk sometimes. I was aware of that, and I was aware of some of the spin-offs, and I was aware of just really grimy 90s and early 2000s shit. Sort of like personal websites of, not just stuff like rotten.com, but like weird erotica portals, stuff like that. Google groups that for kind of like obscure, weird, transgressive stuff. A lot of these smaller spaces. So I'm not 100% sure where I first saw Sotos. I think there's a good chance that I saw that someone posted his stuff on Guro-chan, which was a sort of like Guro hentai themed image board that would occasionally have like other kinds of like weird art discussion as well. And I would hang out on there occasionally, and that just seems like the most realistic place where I probably would have found it.
You heard it here, guys. This guy does not fuck around. It, yeah, I've never even heard of Guro-chan.
Yeah. That's like
It sounds like the name. It sounds like the name of an anime girl. Guru-chan.
well, so it's kind of
Guru-chan, please remove the chainsaw from my orifice.
well, so it is interesting because like nowadays, like I mean that goes back to that thing you were talking about with like cultural mediation. Is like I said in the second episode about Tool, I found this thing by accident, probably at the last time you could find it, sort of by accident. Accident is, of course, a little bit vague because I'm hanging out in places where this kind of thing would be found, but I didn't know who Sotos was, and I wasn't looking for it or anything, not deliberately. And that is
Right. Effectively, you find it because someone else mentions it to you in the right setting, or
yeah.
mentions it to the room.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a very different way. You see, now things are so flattened out. It's kind of like in a way we've almost reverted back to the 1960s where there's 5 channels, and those channels are Reddit, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and I don't know, fucking Pinterest or something. Small in
YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube. Small, intimate spaces for very specialized cultural interests have kind of fallen apart. You've got Discord servers for that kind of thing, and that's kind of where the center of gravity is now. But nobody does weird personal websites anymore. Nobody really does, Google Groups is gone, and of course, with it, massive resources of things that we'll never be able to find again. People are not so interested in carving out a personal space on the internet anymore, which means that when you run across this,
Yeah.
when you run across this stuff in like a Reddit setting, it kind of loses some of its luster,
That's,
you know?
that's a good way of putting it, right? The original impulse on the net was once you start to think of it as websites rather than just addresses for data or, mailboxes, once you start to think of it that way, you spatialize it, it becomes sort of territories or domains, and the instant thought, the primordial instinct is to create your own domain, right? Conquer your own little piece of it, and the personal website is that. That is a very different experience. It's a pain in the ass, right? I remember how annoying it was to have bookmarks.
Yeah.
I do kind of love coasting. I do love coasting off the fact that I can basically just remember what I'm looking for and start typing it in and it comes up. But I've started using bookmarks again a little bit because there really is a point to it. And yeah, I guess now we're all getting instead of having our own little websites and maybe the decentralized the small domains that gather us all to them, right? The niche website that a bunch of 100 people are on. Now we've got now we're all paying rent on somebody else's farm, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's not like a unique it's not a unique observation. You just had a nice way of phrasing it there where I'm like, oh, that does make a lot of sense because there's something kind of nice about having your website with the spinning skulls and shit.
Yeah, and I think that it's also like, especially pertaining to the kind of stuff that we're talking about here, there was a reason that this stuff wasn't supposed to be on everyone's radar. That's kind of interesting in general. With, I mean, even pertaining to Sotos himself, Pure was never supposed to get out into the world in the way that it did. And it had lifelong consequences for Sotos that were... the obvious ones are negative, but probably it's part of the reason that his writing career has been so long. It exposed him to a lot of people, most of whom had no business seeing it, but some of which simply had trouble finding their way there. So the way I see it, in the older form of the internet, where it really is more of a network of individual websites rather than these massive hubs, it was much harder to find your way into stuff like this, and I think that was better, both for those communities and the general public. It's like, the average person doesn't need to be touching this shit with a 10-foot pole, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, you cover that very well in the episodes. It's the ultimate self-selecting audience. So, I mean, we say that about metal too, right? It's just there is not. You don't need to show normies your cool taste in metal. They don't need to know.
Yeah, definitely not. Don't
They ask you if they ask you about metal, tell them you like AC/DC and Amon Amarth. That won't be a lie. If you don't, you're dead. You're dead inside.
But it'll end the conversation, thankfully.
Yes. So then here's some more sort of questions about making of. This was a project you'd been working toward for a while, and that in one way or another you've kind of mentioned to me before as something you felt you needed to tackle. I was interested by the method you took to it. This is you've ended up basically having to assemble an academic publication history for
Yeah,
Sotos.
yeah, I pretty much have.
Right?
I,
You've created your own bibliography and tried to taken seriously the idea that there are meaningfully distinct editions of works and that these editions have their own distinct meanings. You can't just, there's not a strict, even if they're all the same, even if, oh, this is all pure, this is all tool, there's like different material in different editions. So it is in some ways, I mean, even if there's continuity there, it's a different work of art you're dealing with.
yeah, I
And it
mean,
was cool hearing you just, yeah,
oh, I was just gonna say,
go
yeah,
for it.
like I'm trying to make an effort to uh, not dispel all the mystery of Sotos, but to dispel the shit that's just kind of annoying, like not being able to have more concrete information about editions and stuff like that. This information is scattered everywhere, and I don't think that, like, knowing which edition is which needs to be a secret handshake. I think that it's better for people to understand how exactly these things work so that we can navigate them in a way that presents their meaning more clearly, you know?
Yeah, it's also cool hearing you insist on the importance of hard copy for this. Would you say hard copy is uniquely important for Sodos as opposed to, say, other books because there's visuals, or is it something more than that?
I think it's a couple things. So one, I for books I just prefer hard copy. I don't like reading very long blocks of text on screens,
No,
and
I hate it.
yeah, and even e-readers, you don't have like the eye problems, but you're still navigating them like a tablet, which is inherently less convenient than just a physical book. Two, yes, a ton of the scans that are available are missing material, or they're only of one particular edition that might not be the most complete one, so getting your hands on physical copies is still good for that. And then the third thing is, like, I think that there is something significant for Sotos in particular, that these things are made into books and physical objects. I think that it sounds a little absurd, but I think that part of the whole artistic process is the risk of having it on your shelf. I think that
Uh,
I think that if you're getting into this, like, you should run the risk of your Tinder date opening it. You know, I think that if you're
Isn't
interested,
that what we all fantasize about anyway?
yeah, yeah, it
Right?
kind of is, isn't it?
Glenn Dan. It's Glenn Danzig at his bookshelf.
Yes, yes.
Welcome to my book collection. This is just part of my book collection.
Well,
All right, what are we looking? What do we have here? Ah, the werewolf.
well, I do think, yeah. So, I mean, there definitely is, like, the fantasy there that someone will recognize how cool and evil you are, but more sincerely, I think that if you, I think that if you are interested in material like this and you're going to engage with material like this, I think having some kind of skin in the game is important. So one of the reasons that I don't like the mediation of this stuff, through, YouTube commentators and shit like that, is that it kind of flattens it out and it makes it less serious than it actually is. A lot of these guys will cover Sotos to some degree, but it'll be in the context that it's like, oh, this is the sickest and most extreme of sick extreme horror media, which is not what this is. There's something, like, very real and very significant happening in these books, and I think that when you engage with them seriously, you do cross a kind of minor Rubicon. Sotos books are both more and less extreme than people imagine them to be. And especially when you get into some of the later material, some of the places that you'll be taken emotionally, I think there is a passing through that occurs there. So I guess for me, having the physical copy,
Right. Okay. Yeah.
yeah, having the physical copy, which is already like hard to get in the first place, is it's you sort of anteing up for the experience. Now, I do think the like insane limitation and secondary market is kind of bullshit, but I think making them limited and kind of hard to get is fine. They probably should be.
Yeah. Yeah. So it also is an extension of I mean, there's that sort of idea. If for you and us on the outside, it's like you should have to confront the seriousness of the material you're reading, and not you, and without the sort of plausible deniability of a secondhand somebody somebody sanitizing it for you, or even just looking at it through a screen on a PDF you can delete instantly, right?
Yeah.
If there's something about like, okay, you should have to take the act of reading this seriously. On the other hand, there's within Sodos's aesthetic, there's an aesthetic of complicity.
Yes.
He wants to he, as you explained nicely, he thinks there's something kind of contagious about the material itself, and he takes a certain glee. In fact, it may be his fundamental kink in exposing others to it, and tainting them as he sees it. At least the version of himself he presents in Pure and Tool. I'm thinking especially of the conversation with the cops.
Yeah. I think that well, I mean, Sotos is a true believer. He's a true like old school like difficult transgressive art guy. And he believes that participating in some of this media, for lack of a better word, and that can be writing, that can be movies, that can be music, but I think that he believes that there are things that are carved out for specific people, and specialized audiences with extremely specialized interests. And I think that Sotos legitimately believes that most people should not be reading his work. I think that there is.
Oh, I see. So you're saying he wants there to be a barrier to access in the hard copy.
I think that he wants there
Right.
to be.
And there's not like it. There's not an interest in spreading it to everyone, so as to kind of uh, glory in pulling them down. It's more that it's more that he wants to access a coterie audience.
Yeah, so I think that he certainly Sotos very early.
Oh, but if you're a member, sorry, these ideas were kind of separated off from each other. I kind of got tangled there. I think it seems like the idea you're getting at is like he seeks for his books, he seeks out a certain kind of audience, and that audience should not be just anyone. And if you want to enter that audience, you should pay the price of entry and like own or procure a book.
Yeah, I think that Sotos Sotos in his early days certainly. Yeah, I think that it's fair to say in his very early days, when he's like 24 and shit, yeah, he does revel in being an asshole. I mean, that's very clear in Pure.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that he shakes that off pretty quickly, actually. And then later on, when people have asked him questions about like negative responses to his work, like in interviews and shit, he's really been a lot more sort of like upfront and sort of interestingly non-judgmental about it. He's saying in a circuitous way, yeah, man, like obviously it sucks when people who shouldn't be seeing this are exposed to it. That's not what I want to do,
Right. He's like, yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, telling that Well, it's like what we said before, telling your grandma she really doesn't need to hear your brutal death metal band.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
yeah, don't worry about that rock and roll band, right? Or and somebody saying, "Oh, Sotos, I don't like your work. I find it, revolting and morally reprehensible." He just has a kind of like even-tempered, "Yeah, that's good," right? The world would collapse if you, Mr. Literary man on the street, thought that, right? If everyone liked this, we would have a real problem.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah. Um,
Sotos, I think, Sodos's writing is interesting because, especially as you continue through the bibliography, there's so little mention of any sort of normal life. Like he talks about himself extensively, but there's nothing like sort of ordinary and prosaic. There's nothing about him just going to a store or anything. It is just this like merciless, horrible shit nonstop. And
right.
I think there's a sense in which Sotos feels extremely divorced from ordinary society, sort of in an old school outsider art way, which we don't really see much anymore. But it's one of the things that compels me about him is he's one of the last guys who's still producing vital work, who is genuinely just like fucking out of it, like not interacting with the normal world. At least he
Right.
is not
And
unveiling that part at all.
right. It's just he's presenting a mask,
Yeah.
a literary self, right? Yeah. And his work is just the peaks of intensity that he assembles there. Yeah, which is of course a very legitimate way of doing things. Yeah, we don't need George Sotos to tell us about getting milk, right?
Yeah.
At least not in that way. The uh the I mean, and one thing that I'm not sure I realized about this guy to the extent that you made it clear in the episodes is he was walking the walk in a lot of ways. Some of them may be pretty fucked up, right? But in other ways, he was putting himself just in dangerous situations that most people wouldn't want to be in, right? Like, I mean, it sounds like he was actually going to like gay cruising sites where you could get shanked or get AIDS or whatever, and doing this almost like as an anthropologist.
Well, kind of as I think that it's more like he's got an
Not as an anthropologist. That's sorry. I mean, with a kind of scalpel-like dissecting intellect.
He has a kind of anthropological outlook, but he is very, very clear about like his complicity and participation, and he seems to really resent people that. It's interesting. Sotos is doing this sort of almost performance art stuff, but I get the sense that he hates people who claim that that's the primary reason. He is very committed to the idea that the base indulgence is always the primary thing.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. There's actually a very funny I saw a long I have to mention this. This is too funny. I saw a long time ago and somebody had done, like an anthropology book or whatever on gay cruising. And this was a guy who had clearly just found some way to get a university to give him a degree for doing what he was doing, which is gay cruising.
Okay, good for him.
And I mean, right, kind of. But basically, you know, yeah, the part that's funny about it is the classic. Imagine if the what is it? The phrase I can't remember the meme. The hypocrisy. Let's say.
Yeah. The blowback on millions of innocent gay men.
Well, or no, I'm thinking more like, hey, this is my dissertation on like banging hookers with big tits. Right?
Yeah. The worst thing about it is the hypocrisy. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. It's the worst thing about it is the hypocrisy. It's So that's kind of an inverse Sotos almost. But yeah, he's basically he's definitely put it all on the line for this.
Well,
Uh,
I think he was in a unique position. So what's interesting as you go further in, Sotos does on a somewhat regular basis revisit Pure and his arrest in the early days. And one thing that he suggests, especially in some of his mid-period books, was that he looks back on how he was behaving when he was in his like early to mid 20s, and he thinks that like he was a fucking idiot because in Sodos's mind
hmm,
there was a way in which he didn't think anyone would notice what he was doing or like wouldn't really care about it. It would just be sort of like freak show shit and it wouldn't really blow back on him. Then with his arrest, he realizes that there's like dire consequences to walking the walk. But specifically as a result of that arrest, it becomes incredibly difficult to return to any kind of normal life. Like Sotos was getting hate mail about that shit for like decades afterwards. So he sort of got locked
right.
into the outsider art thing because like what else was he gonna do, you know?
He also had a very a mind like it's also a mindset that you can have pre-internet and pre-censorship, right? The possibility of omnipresent, right? We all now have to worry about the Eye of Sauron, which in 2014 was maybe like, or let's say 2017 was a bit of a metaphor still, but at this point with like fully automated surveillance of everything on every platform, it's just literally true. Just, say the wrong thing and you will draw the Eye of Sauron.
Yeah.
That just did not exist at all. So it is a lot easier to feel comfortable just working in your little niche, uh, sending out your vile zines to your crew of chuckling reprobates.
Yeah, and
The
and I mean, if you look back historically, so obviously, Sodos's arrest was for possession of child pornography, but there were other guys from around the same era and later who had to deal with like obscenity charges, like Mike Diana, the comic artist who did Boiled Angel and those zines. You know, he ate an obscenity charge here in Florida, and that followed him for fucking 25 years, something like that. There was definitely something in the water. And it's especially, you have to think about the context of Pure coming out like around the McMartin preschool trial, like really like dead center of 80s moral panic. So I guess he just didn't take it as seriously as maybe he should have.
Yeah. Well, okay. So on that note, let's pause and respond to some comments. We have some people very engaged right now, including Horror Geek 5. D Death Metal Guy, you got here. I'll read off since I'm interviewing. I'll read off the comments. You
Sure.
can respond if you see fit. Um, let's see. So he says in his Pompidou Center talk, I don't think you need to see this. Uh, he said, he being Soda, said Index was the point when he realized he couldn't lie about this material. I assume you're getting to that one later.
Mm-hmm.
Let's
That would
see.
be
Disgorging
that would
talks.
be next.
Yeah, disgorging talks also about acknowledging the different, the need for a small audience when he's speaking publicly. 2013 edition of Tool, Colin Wilson's The Outsider. Have you read that? What is that?
Oh yeah, The Outsider is just sort of like a classic. I want to is that 50s or 60s novel? I can't recall exactly when. Let me see. Well, no, hold on. I'm thinking of a different. I'm thinking of The Outsiders.
Oh yeah, that's like hey pony boy, don't die.
Yeah, that's what I was going. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
so 1950. Oh, okay. This The Outsider from 1956. Yeah, I'm not. I am only familiar with that like by name and cover. I haven't read it myself.
Mhm.
It looks like sort of
Okay.
50s like kind of Kafka or Camus type shit. So it looks cool. And
Yeah, seems like an interesting book. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Like, sort of, maybe, I guess this is one of the formative texts for the modern sense of outsider art. Although it's funny because all of the people he covers in this are like, even in the 50s, were already massively successful, influential artists,
hmm
right? Like, the difference, I mean, I get how you can use this to interpret what's going on with someone like Sotos or, I don't know, any other niche weirdo. But yeah, the people he's talking about are like H.G. Wells, Kafka, Camus, T.S. Eliot, Hemingway, Hermann Hesse, Václav Nijinsky, the dancer, William Blake, Friedrich Nietzsche, uh, all these, like, Dostoevsky. I mean, Nietzsche didn't live to see his success. Blake didn't live to see his success, really. Neither of them. Other than that, these are people who are just, like, massively successful and lauded in their lifetime. So I can see how there's obviously, a connection, but it's also very funny that I mean, setting this kind of figure along the kind of outsider figure that we get in transgressive literature or metal, right?
yeah, it's a sort of the position of stuff like that is always sort of like, it's always sort of like a man set against society, whereas the stuff that I'm more interested in is sort of like being a parasite within the bowels of society. I don't know. That's something that's
Right.
like kind of intriguing.
Right. People who are completely actually outside society. Right. Whereas these are all, like, widely lauded oppositional figures. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, Horror Geek
Yeah.
is one of the guys from the private Sotos Discord server that I got invited to shortly after I think the first episode came out. So, what's up to him?
Nice.
And those guys have been a great
Shout out
source
to the
of
private server.
yeah, they've been a great source of additional information on the project because, like I said, information about editions and stuff like that is scattered all over the place. So, I've had to word of mouth a lot of my information together.
Okay, yeah, we got a few
Yeah, I can.
we got a few others.
I can see him there.
Yeah, you can respond to them.
Yeah, sure. So, let's see. Anthony number 4, which he was featured in, must have made him feel bad. I don't know. I was reading that. I was reading that interview in the Sotos edition of Timeless, where where that guy was asking him, "Oh, do you think that Jim Goad got basically got run up for his ideology and the things that he wrote?" And Soto says Jim Goad got put in jail because he punched his girlfriend. Like that's it's a fucking open and shut case. You know, talk about fucking censorship and everything. The guy assaulted a woman. That's pretty fun. Ex Umbra, super late, but just wanted to say I saw your peer review at a particularly grueling day at work, and it convinced me to actually watch a podcast because I hate podcasts. Thanks, man. I'm glad that you enjoy it. I'm very excited to do this project, and I always thought there needed to be something like this for Sotos' work. Charles Styles.
I think podcast hating is probably the correct opinion, and so it's always an honor when we can sort of turn an unconverted podcast.
We can be one of the good ones. Yeah. And
yes, yes, yeah.
And what's up to Charles Styles and Destruction Ritual, Gorgoroth to everyone. Okay, so we're
Gorgoroth. No. All right, I'll throw Gorgoroth in the chat, just so it's official.
Yeah, you gotta.
Oh wait, I got one. I got one for today. There we go.
Yeah, there you go.
Damn, that Let's Hear It for Violence Against Women sounds like a fucking anal cunt song.
Oh, that's something that I turned Disgorging Consciousness onto. That's from Boyd Rice Presents Hatesville, which is kind of a yeah, it's a cool kind of experimental record, a little bit industrial, but it's basically strange loops.
This is like cabaret thing.
Yeah, kinda. Yeah, it's like weird loops with monologues over them, and Let's Hear It for Violence Towards Women is actually Jim Goad reading a piece that he wrote in Answer Me, number 4. And actually, that record in general is like super influential to me. I found that, I think, when I was in high school, and it just blew the doors open on a bunch of like weird experimental stuff that I was really curious about.
Yeah, your Doug Pierce is
Yes.
Boyd Rice.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So, on that note, let's did my did this did some one more question. Have a question about what excited you to initially. Oh, okay. Never mind. I'm not sure I understand what disgorging is saying there.
Oh,
Anyway,
okay. Yeah, disgorging. I mean, as far as like what excited me initially, because it was like really sick and evil. I was a teenager, and it was like the most extreme thing I had ever seen. Like, later on, I started to realize that there was a lot more to it. Or, no, I got that sense pretty early on, and that was one of the things that intrigued me. But yeah, flat out, like, my first time seeing it was just like, holy fuck, this is like the most brutal thing that I've ever read. And like, kind of like I said in my piece on Tool, what it revealed was like, well, if this is out there, this probably isn't the only thing like it. So maybe I need to start looking around. And that's how I kind of really got into transgressive literature and like experimental writing, was largely through Sotos.
the death metal guys, transgressive literature iceberg. That'll be our next
Oh
video.
God, fuck me.
We can do it. Let's fucking sell out. All right. So on that note, let's talk about something fun that algorithms love: pornography.
Sure.
One sort of big dumb question that occurred to me as I listened to these was a couple times, or I mean, several times you referred relatively briefly and decidedly to the stuff in Pure and Tool as pornography. Full disclosure, I have not gotten to episode 3 yet. I try to avoid my own podcast when I'm not doing
Yeah,
anything
no, I get it.
at the expense of my collaborator. Yeah, I have listened to those two and really enjoyed them. So the basically in the first two, you talk about you're like, look, what these early provocative works by Sotos are, they're basically a kind of pornography. I assume the thing that's interesting, right, is if that claim is correct, why didn't he just go to jail? Because obviously, if it's just right, when you make that claim, I know, like, what you don't mean it's porn. You mean it's something a little different, right? Something like second order pornography or something like that. Because if it was just porn, given the subject matter, he would still be in prison, right? Or he'd be dead.
Yeah.
So like how would you explain this concept of a work of art or media that can best be described as pornography, but doesn't quite cross the lines that would make it something, that we could all agree should be burned?
Well, so this is a big question, and I think the definition of pornography and what pornography means to both Peter Sotos and to society at large is a pretty big open-ended question that is explored throughout his career. It might be the question.
Okay. Yeah.
So I operate off of sort of my own cobbled together definition that I'm still iterating on, but feels kind of true. And I think that it's like the nutshell version that I would give is pornography is media designed to satisfy an urge in a way that bypasses logical processes. It is media that strikes out at feelings and sensations and drives that are sort of like not even part of the frontal lobe. So in this context, you can see that obviously visual depictions of sex are pornography, but then there's other forms of pornography.
Maybe it's media that immediately immediately triggers a reward stimulus, or
Yeah,
sets you on a dopaminergic path towards a reward stimulus.
yeah,
I mean, it's getting back to that classic thing about art as something that elicits a libidinous, the Kantian thing, right? Which even though Kant is wrong in all sorts of ways, there's something to this idea that artwork elicits the passions but doesn't present an object for gratification, right? The classic thing is you can say, hey, that statue of Aphrodite has a nice ass, but according to Kant, you aren't actually moved to impure desire. Now this is wrong. Obviously, like, you say that statue of Aphrodite has a nice ass, you want to fuck the statue, but you can't because it's a statue. And is pornography something that I guess moves one step down that pathway, so that the instead of just activating your passions, it is moving you toward a kind of like substitute gratification.
I
Like,
think, yeah,
jerking it, or the emotional equivalent of jerking it.
yes. So I think that the idea of like a substitution for a desire is a big component of it, and that's something that I talk about a lot in the third episode, because that's another theme that starts coming up constantly in Sodos's work, which is the idea of sort of proxies. For desires that are impossible or impractical or unavailable in some way. And the most obvious way that we can think of that is in pornography being a proxy for sex, which it can be, but I think that Sotos is more interested in like pornography beyond that. Not merely as like a convenient replacement for something you can't access, but a sort of whole experience unto itself. I've got this joke that I have with like my girlfriend and just friends of mine, and it's stolen from an old episode of Loveline, and it's like, sex is good, but it's not the real thing, and then you do like a jerking off motion with your hand. I think that Sotos is very interested in investigating pornography for exactly what it is, and he has ways of observing it and reframing and recontextualizing it in ways that bring the he's breaking down the sort of like frontal lobe jamming quality of pornography and making you look at it in this much more removed manner, which is also not far off of stuff that one of his big influences, Andrea Dworkin, would do, where she would, talk about sexual violence perpetrated against women or sort of patriarchal cultural artifacts, and she would strip the easy cultural context we have away from these things to sort of like lay them bare for how sinister they actually are. So I think that Sotos in a lot of ways wants to take pornography and he wants to cancel out your immediate intuitive animal reaction to it and make you observe it and consider it in a radically different context.
Oh, okay. So then it isn't porn, it's art. It sounds like really what it is like, I've been trying to figure this out, like, there's a couple ways you can break this down, because on the one hand, you could say, okay, if it's just porn, what is it porn of?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And if it's just porn of murdering children, which is what it's about, like, I mean, that would just mean it's the kind of porn that should be burned.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so the question is, okay, is there different subject matter? Is it actually porn of something at one remove from that? Like porn of horror, porn of a certain kind of situation. You know what I mean? I'm not sure what the answer to that X would be. But then it sounds like what you're saying is he's really interested in not the maybe the thing that makes it different from this is he's interested not so much in the subject matter of pornography as the method of pornography.
Yes.
And that applying it to the most heinous subject matter, which almost nobody is actually directly interested in, is applying it to that heinous subject matter, which is so divorced from what almost everyone else jorks it to, suddenly casts into relief the series of techniques that make porn porn.
Well, so
and in that case, it's like porn itself is becoming the content of the art.
yeah, so the thing is, like, Sotos, I don't want to give the impression that, like, the fundamental kernel of this is, like, fucking like humanist nonsense revealing the dark heart of man or something. Like, that's not
No,
really,
that's not what I mean. Yeah.
no, I'm clarifying that for anyone listening. So something that's interesting about what Sotos does is that he sort of detaches you from that primary animal impulse to look at these horrible things, but then he also, like, reaffirms that that's the origin of your interest in the first place. When we talk about pornography, let's not emphasize like masturbation so much, because, like, you don't need that for it to be pornography. And also, like, I think that he wants to point out that Sotos rejects the concept that fantasy is merely fantasy. He's very illiberal in that sense. He believes that these things you desire fucking mean something. They might not be this, like, one-to-one Freudian formation or something, but they absolutely reflect something about you.
Right, they reflect something that one wants to do, even if one is never going to do it and has no interest in doing it.
Or
Right.
even if it's, like, what you really want to do is, like, you don't understand it, so it takes this sort of bizarre form because you can't really access the thing that you're actually looking for. And as far as, like, the relationship between art and pornography goes, like, I think there is a lot of art that is inherently pornographic. So, for instance, I'm a Guro art guy. I collect those kinds of art books and stuff. And I obviously I love the artistry and everything that's going on in them. I like how expressive it is, things about the visual component. But ultimately, it's like I'm looking at drawings of people being, like, tortured and killed. Like, you can't get away from that part of it. And yes, obviously that's, like, a central motivator of my interest, is I want to look at these things. It's kind of like how I was talking to you a while back about a podcast I was listening to where there was it was a conversation between some guy that runs the show and a guy who's a scholar on Desaad. And I was talking to you about I was talking to you about how annoying it was that this guy wanted to talk about Desaad and seemed to want to talk about everything except for the sex and violence. And it's like, my man, that's what makes these books. That's what they're made of. My Guro art books are made of, pencil strokes and brush strokes, but what they're depicting is, like, people being tortured and suffering. Like, let's not forget what is just on the tin of these things. And I think Sotos is a guy who wants to confront that extremely directly. He's, these things are not metaphorical. There's no allegory going on here. This video of this act
No,
is
I get
exactly
that.
what it is.
So, I want to reply to Horror Geek. I think Horror Geek is replying to me when he says the Wikipedia media criticism definition of his work misses the importance of the prurient aspect. I mean, yeah, no shit. I was trying to make sense of the death metal guy's definition.
No, I think he's sort of
if you define what
well, no, he's just elaborating on a kind of common thing in general. That's less about you and more about the discourse about this stuff in general.
yeah. I just mean if you define it as like, well, porn attempts to short circuit the frontal lobe and activate your desire in an immediate way that's like a proxy for touch, right, or smell or whatever, then if it's then the fact that he is trying to deal with media that does that, but also put it at one remove from it and make us look at the media that is trying to short circuit your frontal lobe in this way. That is like a classic aesthetic disinterest argument. So it's, even if that's not the only thing that's going on here, it definitely seems to be part of what's going on here is on the one hand, activating that visceral pornographic impulse towards horror and towards, towards the acts being described, and on the other hand, setting you at a distance from it, right? The coldness, the observational coldness is part of the artistic package and part of what makes it porn that's not just porn.
Yeah.
I mean,
and
is it, oh my God, I hate myself for using this phrase, but like somehow what we're talking about here is, it's a kind of meta porn, right? It is, but it isn't. It's porn, but it's porn about porn, and
so something that's interesting is there's a very important distinction that Sotos likes to draw about the people who engage not necessarily with his work, but with this sort of like prurient degenerate side of life. And he sees them as falling into like two broad categories. And one is sort of like pathetic and desperate people who can only get the lowest level of these things versus those who are very specifically seeking these experiences out. So, if you are to say, he did an interview where he was talking about Pure Filth, a book that he did where he transcribed a lot of the dialogue in porno tapes produced by Jamie Gillis. And he said, there's multiple different kinds of people who pick up a $5 crack whore. There's people who are poor and get that because that's what they can afford. And then there's people who very specifically want a $5 crack whore. And Sotos writes for the latter audience, obviously.
Yeah. Okay. So this gets back maybe to where we can take this, which is, I mean, basically it sounds like, in some ways I basically just asked you to talk about the central idea of the entire series. And I'm sure you'll get clearer on that idea as the series goes on. And, examine it from more sides and all that. It's one of the, and I think now we've got some potential avenues that like, you've approached it now in our conversation from several different angles, and it seems like all of them are in the mix, and it'll be interesting to see what comes of that and what other angles show up. But related to that, I mean, you were just saying that in some ways what counts as porn is one of the central questions of Sotos' work, and maybe one of the central questions of the series you're working on it. And as you said, right, let's not focus I was using the example of masturbation as, to try to make things concrete. But you're right, right? Porn isn't just a thing that stimulates that act. It is a, it's a form, right?
Yeah.
And Sotos seems very ahead of, and that's something that we all are starting to understand now. You're starting to see like pop psych stuff on YouTube about how everything is porn now. You know, the entire about how say the YouTube homepage or the certainly TikTok shorts and anything that imitates it, but even just things like, you know, platform image content homepages are designed to instill the goon impulse.
Yes. Yeah, I think that I think that in a large,
we're starting to become yeah. Go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think in a large part, like Sotos is really ahead of his time because he's sort of explicating Gooner mindset decades before that's like conceptualized amongst normal people.
Exactly. And so that, I mean, that in itself is, if somebody was to say, what's the point of this miserable, you know, what's the point of this miserable sadistic writing? That's a very good counterpoint. It's like, it took someone who was in this shit up to the gills to understand this kind of, this aspect of pornography like 30 years before it became everywhere. And so maybe this guy really does speak to our contemporary moment in a lot of ways. You know, basically part of what he's doing is a Malcolm McLaren is, I know it's not the only thing that's going on, but there is this Malcolm McLarenization where I've always thought the medium is the message is a really stupid fucking phrase. It's like, no, the medium has a message. But like, in terms of like art criticism, hey buddy, it's the form, not the content. Pay attention to the form. That's, you know, doing that with porn, that, you know, porn is a form, a mode of delivery, is a valuable contribution, and he was clearly there first.
Yeah, he was there for, well,
you know, like,
I think one of the things that he explicates is like, so as I cover the next set of books, those that belong to like the proxy era, and those would be, for those following along at home, those are Index, Special, Lazy, and Tick. And then Tool is included there. It was first released then, but it was written before. I don't really consider it part of that, whatever. There's a lot more stuff about gay cruising. And really what he explicates is that, like, gay cruising, especially in, like, the really shitty establishments that he was going to, those are the original gooners. Guys who are just absolutely consumed, just consumed and desperate for a sexual fulfillment that never actually arrives, and who feed upon the sense of their own worthlessness and sort of degeneracy and a willful participation in this self-destructive, addictive process, which is exactly what all the, like, gooner shit is formed around. I find that super interesting.
You're right. Another classic type that probably like overlapped almost one-to-one with cruising stuff is the people who just lived in porn theaters, right?
Yes.
Some of whom were heterosexual, but would be doing the same kind of CD, right? Intentionally seeking out the $5 crack or whatever,
yes,
right? It's so in a way, a lot of what he deals with is mediated sex addiction, long before it became like the mainstream pathology that it is now.
Yeah, which is
it also is one way. I mean, you know, that's a great example of like, you know, when people say things like, you know, porn turns you gay or porn's going to make you true out, right? Even though that's not like literally true, they really are getting at something about the drives it activates and the chains of the chains of escalating stimulus and the amounts of substitution and inversion and variation required to get them.
Yeah.
And so there is a funny way that if everything is porn now, oh shit, we're all being turned into gay cruisers.
We're all getting turned into gay cruisers, and just like more broadly, Sotos is kind of interesting. He goes back and forth on the hedonic treadmill. I think that he is I think that he is sort of uncertain about that himself. Do prurient desires necessarily lead to more and worse prurient desires? And I think that at different points in different books, he comes down on either side of that argument. In some contexts, he'll say, it's absurd to think that anything other than a desire for sex with children would lead people to child pornography. That's sort of a point he makes about what he thinks of as sort of the absurdity of obscenity laws in general. He's like, these people are already out there looking for it. It doesn't have shit to do with, whatever else you're watching.
Right.
But in other instances, he does point to a kind of like, the ante needs to be continuously upped. Now, personally, I would say that, like, it's sort of neither. It's more people that are struggling for the actual center of their desire, but are unable to articulate it or understand it sufficiently. So they're sort of like groping around in the dark, trying to find what that thing is that they crave so much. So I think,
and you're saying that those are the people who are most vulnerable to the hedonic treadmill, or you're saying that
I'm saying that that's sort of what the hedonic treadmill actually is. I think that like, just like bringing this to the realm because of what we're talking about, just talking about sexual compulsion. I think that generally when people get involved, especially in like extreme or aberrant forms of sexuality, what they're really seeking is to experience some sort of emotion, some sort of complex sensation that goes beyond the physical. They're trying to fulfill something like quite deep, I think. But I think that understanding what that is extraordinarily difficult, and it leads people to they get pointed in the wrong direction and they're like, oh, well, this is the thing, but I just haven't gone far enough. You see that a lot in the perpetual anti-upping that you'll see in the BDSM scene. When, the reality of the BDSM scene is that 80% of people shouldn't be involved in it because what they're looking for is not actually BDSM. This is just like the shape that it's taken in their mind for lack of a better idea.
Yeah, well, I think the hedonic treadmill stuff is just like obviously the correct like there's also different answers depending on time and situation, right? Like for somebody to find themselves interested in really fucked up shit in the late 80s by accident, yeah, that's almost inconceivable because like Sotos' niche audience themselves, they have to jump through a ton of hurdles, right? And seek it out. Whereas like on the internet now, people, as you were saying, people can find all sorts of shit. People through natural processes of exploration and intensification can find all sorts of shit that they did not imagine themselves finding at the beginning.
Well, I think this is a structure. I think this is a structure of behavior that is basically continuously happening in modern society. And it changes forms slightly, and it gets like mediated by new kinds of technology or just cultural circumstance or something. But I think that what the gay cruisers in the 80s are doing is like remarkably similar to what like gooner guys now are doing, or like when I was coming up, the shit that I saw, which was just like the Wild West of file sharing, where people are just renaming stuff for the lulz. And you are getting some shit that you really didn't expect just because people are sort of malicious and they want to put
that's interesting. Talk about that.
Oh, dude. Oh my god, dude. Back in the 2000s, like peer-to-peer.
I wasn't right for the new people. I wasn't very online back in the day. Mm-hmm. In fact, that's one of the things that probably is a defining difference between us is I now am pretty online, but I don't really like it. I don't really like being very online very much. I'm not very good at it. And it doesn't have positive effects on me temperamentally. Mm-hmm. the death metal guy, it just lives and breathes this shit,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
since
I
he
do.
was a teenager, and so there's a lot of stuff. I think I vaguely heard of this phenomenon, but please regale me. I
Oh,
never encountered it myself. Yeah.
so what's interesting is like, I don't. Okay, I'll say something, sort of like strident and bothersome, but I think that it's like important to say. Basically, at no point since the advent of pornography has it ever been difficult to come into contact with child pornography or other forms of like illegal pornography. Since the first, fucking daguerreotype of a naked lady was made, there was somebody doing it with children.
Yeah. Well,
So
that's got to be true, right? They were swapping like, ooh, erotic picture of Turkish boy, right?
yes, yeah.
That was, yeah.
This is, and so this is another topic that's covered by Sotos, which is just the scope and the history, the sort of unending chain of this sort of exploitation. So back in the 80s, so one of the interesting things is Sotos is one of the first people, possibly the first person ever in the United States to get run up on child pornography laws, which had basically not existed until the 1980s. It was a thing, it was out there, but people weren't thinking of it very much, and it just like nobody really bothered to construct laws around it. And God knows the situation in Europe was even fucking crazier. There were places where people were legally producing child pornography like into the 90s, I believe. So back in the back in the 80s when Sotos was getting into all this crazy shit, it was just a matter of like hanging around the adult bookstores and asking people until someone would show it to you. Nowadays it's because you get sucked into like a groomer Telegram group, and you're 13 years old and you don't know what you're doing, and there's some guy sending you a picture of a kid getting fucked. Back in the 2000s, like when I was coming up, it was more sort of like insane Scud missile shit. There was still like child pornography on the ClearNet and everything, but the real problem was people who were getting it and like mislabeling it and putting it on peer-to-peer file sharing services. So like, I don't know if there was some sort of code they were using for like image or video names or something that was designed to lead people to who were interested in that to find it. But I definitely stumbled across some stuff like as a teenager, unintentionally, that was, shall we say, quite upsetting. Or if I want to be a little bit more dramatic, definitely stuff that's like stuck in my brain for the rest of my life.
Oh God, yeah.
Oh yeah, well no, I think that, so one thing that I guess I'd like to say, I mean we fuck around, we're into this transgressive stuff and everything. I will say it becomes easy to get very jaded about this stuff and be jokey about it and everything. You're a bad guy and you like all these like fucked up books and everything. But I will say, like, just categorically, child pornography is like the worst thing in the world. Like, you see a single image of it and it does like eat up a part of you permanently. It's just like, there's nothing I can say apart from like, it's the worst thing. Just it really is, and there's no way to express just how bad it actually is, but Sotos comes pretty close with some of his descriptions of things, and I believe that that's very intentional. He's trying to bring you to as close as you can possibly get to that fucking place without literally just sticking the picture in your face.
Yeah.
So basically in the 2000s it was Wild West shit, and you could see stuff accidentally that was genuinely haunting, I would say.
Interesting. So that's
Oh, it sucks, dude. It's fucking horrible.
That's sad. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really bad.
Yeah.
I remember, just like me at like fucking 14 or something, popping open an image file and it's that, and I'm just like, holy fuck. you know. It just like your mouse like snaps to the X in the corner like before the image is even processed in your brain. It's fucking yeah. But obviously,
that's what he's part of what he's getting at in that police station scene. And I
oh
think
yeah,
that one has stuck with me because it's fucking scary, you know? I mean, that kind of idea of contagion is, you know, oh, you know, you've interfaced with it at all. Now you're tainted too, right? I have a
yeah.
I have a high disgust threshold, so, you know, I'm not like a I'm not easily disgusted at this point, but I'm always aware of where my disgust threshold, you know, or not high disgust threshold. Sorry, I have a high, you know, what is it? That's personality type things where it's like liberals don't have a disgust meter. I have a very well calibrated disgust meter, right? And you know, so things like that, you know, that kind of idea of sort of contamination by coming in simply by what, you know, the cops or the people trying to stop and other people try to stop this shit coming into contact with it is very scary, you know. It's something we've talked about before a little bit too. You know, you talk about the way that like even the people who spend a lot of time trying to contend with this kind of material end up kind of poisoned by it as well, right?
Yeah, so
That's fucking scary.
so there's that is an aspect, but then like most things with Sotos, there is this sort of like reverse side of the coin. And I would say that one of the bigger things that I have to say about Sotos, and what I think is an important idea, is the idea that if you find yourself interacting with this stuff in a substantial way, what motivates that interaction? And that goes for the people who are gleefully participating in it and the people who are trying to stop it. And obviously, the mechanical process that comes out the other end of that impulse is radically different, but I think Soto suggests that way deep down there's a kernel of similarity there. You are drawn to this awful thing, and then it's only a system of cultural paradigms and mores and legal structures that send you in one direction with it or another. He's suggesting, I think, in what I read in Sotos, that the impulse itself is this like protean formless thing that exists that gets shaped as it's extruded out the other side of your personality into something that actually touches the world around it. So I think that one of the things that he suggests is that any of us who are coming into contact with this stuff in greater or lesser proportions are only a couple twists of a couple different dials away from moving much more definitively into that space. You adjust the cultural situation, you adjust your personality a little bit, and all of a sudden you're like much more involved in this shit. And what does that necessarily indicate about the people who are involved? Something that Soto says repeatedly, like a phrase that keeps coming up in his books, is honestly, it can't be worth it. When he's talking about the cops in Tool, he says that. You know, it's like, yeah, on one hand, sure, yeah, there is that corrosive, sort of contaminating effect of coming into contact with this stuff. But there's also, like, I mean, surely just your need for justice couldn't be the only thing keeping you here. It wouldn't be worth it putting yourself through that just for that abstract value. So you are drawn to this in some sense. And that's sort of what he suggests about, like, true crime as a literary endeavor in general, that it's like, you can have whatever feelings out the other side of this that you want, or you can take whatever action you want based on your values and the kind of person you believe yourself to be. But way at the bottom of this, we're all looking at this shit for the same reason. We're drawn to it, and that thing doesn't have a name, and it doesn't have a specific shape or outline, but there's something there. And I think that he's pointing that out. Very
there's
eloquently.
there's a hunger for contact with something that is uh you know just the extremist of the extreme,
Yeah.
whether that's a kind of understanding or something, or a feeling or something worse, right?
And I think that
It's
I think that in a lot of cases it's all those things mixed together.
mhm.
For me, I would say that my own interest in this sort of thing is very, very complex and multidimensional. I am drawn to sort of like extreme, horrible, prurient things in general. I am fascinated by those things, and there is, in some sense, a sort of like gleeful, sinister aspect to it. But there's also a kind of like deeply emotional aspect to it. There's a lot of these things that I read, and I am genuinely upset by a lot of this stuff, and
Right.
yet I am drawn to
Right.
it.
Well, and in ways you're probably processing the kinds of, trying to reckon with the kinds of, like, whatever horrible shit got sent to you on SoulSeek or whatever, right? Is like you're upset in ways that you were upset then.
Well, yeah, but even
Yeah.
like even to just be like more straightforward about it, it's like when when I see a historical picture of a bunch of like I don't know, like fucking comfort women from World War II or something. I am like captured by the tragedy of that and the despair of the situation, but there's absolutely just sort of like a prurient like sort of eroticized quality to that also to me. Like these things exist in parallel with one another, and I think that is largely how they
I
do
see
for
what you
most
mean. Yeah.
people. Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm very open about like my own interest in this stuff. Like I think that's an important part of Sotos is like you're there for a reason, man. Like you said, you don't find this for like no fucking reason. Now, I'm not interested sexually in the things that Sotos is, but in just like exploring these like awful things and coming into contact with this sort of like savage violence and like cruelty, yeah, I get that on a very base level.
Yeah, so let's pull back from that then. I mean, that leads back to like one of the most fundamental ways that I think, you know, uh, let's take it back to heavy metal basically. There is the way you started this series, right? You invoked that first time that everyone saw a picture of a serial killer,
Mm-hmm.
right? In their doing their serial killer thing and thought, man, that's hard.
Yeah.
Uh, that's never been my jam, but it is for a lot of metal people to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, and it's obviously something we all understand, and we all listen to songs about it all the time. The interesting thing is the vast gulf of difference between what Sotos does and what, say, take your pick, Brutal Death or Slam Band
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this because that difference exists for me too, right? Like I'm exposed to a lot of this stuff in metal, right? You could see there's all sorts of BDM or slam songs dealing with most of the kinds of horrific acts Sodos is into, or
Mm-hmm.
not into, or is concerned with. You could
Definitely
see
into to a
almost
degree. Like definitely.
right, right. You could see almost identical subject matter or identical subject matter between brutal death lyrics, right? Like, oh yeah, great, it's a brutal death song about murdering children,
Yeah.
and you see it and you kind of roll your eyes and you kind of engage with you can kind of be like, oh whoa, this is really visceral, this is intense. It can bring you to that contact with the extreme thing that Sotos is talking about, like, you can have that prurient fascination with it, Um, and then at the same time be like, yeah, it's a brutal death metal song, right? There's a way that it's a convention. It instantly gets slotted into horror movie, and that gives
Hmm.
you a defense from it.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like, and you can laugh at it. It's funny, right? I mean, for the most part, the stuff in Brutal Death Songs, right? It is partly an exploration of the darkest reaches of human action. It is partly a perverse, vicarious enjoyment of them. I'm the bad guy.
Hmm.
I'm the powerful bad guy, and it's partly funny. And we're very familiar with that continuum. It's just whereas there's something about doing it with words on page and suggestive images that makes it very different.
So I think that it really just has to do, like you suggested, with like the structure that it's taking. So
Hmm.
so like you said, when you're listening to a brutal death record, it's like there's a system for this. There's an aesthetic thread that unifies these things together, which makes it part of an art scene, which makes it not scary. And I think that's where the
Right,
experience.
it's a convention. You could slot it into a convention.
Yes, and that's why I think
Yeah.
the experimental quality of Sotos is very important. I think that a lot of the stuff that Sotos writes about, if he wrote it in a straightforward like fictional narrative or even like a memoir, it wouldn't be nearly as intense because again we have systems for understanding those things. But when he starts just like mashing chunks of text together and doing weird looping meditative stuff that you can't really grasp the meaning behind. I would, and especially in later books where you'll have several paragraphs on one distinct thread of thought, and then a sentence halfway through the last paragraph will just T-bone into it and carry it in a completely different direction. All of these things are designed to sort of confuse and discombobulate the reader and break them out of whatever pattern they're trying to apply to the writing. So instead of allowing you to treat this as though it's a form that you're familiar with, it it destroys all of those commonly understood structures that you're familiar with, forcing you to really engage with it on like a word by word level, where otherwise you'd kind of like gloss by it. Like for me, it takes a really long time to read a Sotos book. I can only read
Right.
like 20 or 30 pages at a time because it's so dense and it's so difficult, and trying to follow the different threads that are going on can be very challenging.
Dude, I love your notion of one sentence T-boning another.
Yeah, dude, it totally
Sorry,
happens all the
that's
time.
it makes sense. So yeah, right. There's a disruption of habituation
Yes.
and he's continually reworking the form of delivery in ways that prevent us from engaging our banalization mechanisms.
Yes.
He's practicing an art of surprise and refusing habituation and calcification, which is like a torture method,
Yes. Yes.
right?
So
Like you're never supposed to know when the blow is coming, right? Just as your voluptuous Mossad handler is about to waterboard you, she instead steps on your balls.
yeah.
Um,
Well, I think I think that this sort of brings me to a broader idea of, we talk about transgressive fiction as though it's its own thing, but I really perceive it as like a style of experimental writing. Because I like a lot of like sort of non-extreme but still highly experimental writing too. And I
sure.
talk about that a little bit in my piece on Tool, where it's like, if you present this stuff in a normal manner, then it's just, like I said, extreme horror. It's just like Stephen King, but with more gore. And that doesn't feel transgressive to me.
Right.
You know?
Stephen King, but IRL.
Yeah, like that doesn't
It's,
really excite my imagination at all.
right. And it also, it's presented in a way where you can't sideline the content. Like, when I listen to a Brutal Death song, I am, you know, 99% of the time, I am totally uninterested in the content of the lyrics. I'll look it up if we're doing a review, right?
Yeah.
If he says like the most badass, like eroticized thing about murdering hookers ever, I'll be like, damn, he fucking,
he
like,
really
man,
killed the
that's
shit out of
fucking
that hooker.
badass, right? Exactly. And it's very easy. You can engage with it in peaks rather than, the norm. And it's whereas with Sodos's work, it just is the words about these words about these otherwise unspeakable actions. And you can't look away. You can't look away, and you can't routinize it.
Yeah. And I think that, like, we keep coming back to that because I think that it's crucial that, like, the way this stuff is presented, Sotos' writing style itself is kind of fascinating. That's why I've spent a lot of time kind of digging into, like, mechanically what he's doing, because I think that's an underappreciated part of his work. Sotos never works in metaphor or simile or analogy or anything like that. It is just these brute, flat sentences. Like Hemingway gone horribly awry, of
Right. Even his author photo looks like that. The one you just stuck in the chat.
Yeah.
Or in the thumbnail. Yeah.
I like it because it's like the only one where he's smiling. Mm-hmm. So from top to bottom, engaging with Sotos is a very complete aesthetic experience. Not merely in the style of, like, his prose, so to speak, and not merely in, like, whatever kind of picture collage content he might have, but in the sense that you have to engage with the totality. It's like you need to read the text, you need to see the pictures, you need to hold the object in your hands that someone was insane enough to, like, print copies of, and you need to seriously engage with it. Because I think that there's a way that you could read Sotos where you could just read the words and you could be like, oh, well, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was, and you can go away. But I think that it's essential that you try to engage with it on an emotional level. You have to meet this stuff to a degree. You cannot, you can't sit there, watching the horror movie and be like, yeah, that's a guy in a suit. That's fake. That's not real, I mean, you can do that, but then you're simply, like, not engaging with the thing that you paid money to see, which seems kind of fucking silly.
Right, then you're in denial.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's supposed to be something meditative about it. If you're not making yourself look at and think about the horror, if you're engaging, if you want to look away, then why are you reading them? The best way of looking away is not reading it.
Yes. And I think that there's something very illegitimate about looking at this stuff, and I think there's people who read Sotos, or at least skim it, and their goal is to, like, win. It's like, I'm going to get one over on this guy by not being bothered about these extremely bothersome things. Right. It's a very silly way to engage with any sort of art.
Yeah. For sure. So, and what you said about metaphor is right on too. I mean, I guess, like, maybe this was already implied in what I said, but, like, we've said this on the show before a couple times, is that, like, 95% of the violence and the violence against women and brutal death, it's like, not only is it eroticized descriptions of violence, which of course can have its own sort of visceral sexual appeal, it's more just like, it almost just cashes out as a metaphor instantly.
Yeah.
Right? Oh yeah, you really, quote, murdered that hooker, as in you stuck it to your old lady on a Saturday night while like a Saw movie was playing in the background.
Yeah.
That's like that's just like it really does like um you can obviously take the violence of it, the eroticized violence aspect more seriously, but it metaphorically cashes out very quickly as just like this is obviously about like sex. Sex maybe with like more piercings and handcuffs involved.
Yeah.
And that's fine, right? That's great. But like it's the rare brutal death that like makes you reckon with this stuff on anything more than that level at all. And then Sotos is like, 7 levels beyond that. In terms of the lack of metaphor. It's the yeah. So yeah, that was the last just thing I wanted to point out about that metal connection is it is, I guess, just like and the difference between how one encounters it there and how we encounter it. It's crazy how fundamental that stuff is to metal in general.
Hmm.
I was listening to the Iron Maiden self-titled,
Yeah.
right? It's there's serial killer shit all over the first two Maiden records.
Hmm.
I mean, the Killer's title track, which is brilliant and musically probably is one of the first things that sounds like pagan black metal or whatever. It's it's an eroticized serial killer song. Killer behind you.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
it's
I mean, it goes.
and
I mean,
you know,
it goes even further back than that. Just like, I mean, just eroticized depictions of violence throughout, fucking all the way back to like pagan mythology. I mean, it's a continuous
oh
thread.
oh well yes well there's definitely that, yeah, sure, eroticized violence in paganism and in Christianity for sure,
Oh yeah,
yes,
definitely.
but like I just meant more like it's funny that that song doesn't even sound like what I meant was that doesn't even sound like what we would now type as a serial killer song,
Yeah.
right? It sort of you could have that song be about Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner or whatever. And sorry, I think it just cut out for a sec, but let us know in the chat if it's still going. You could have that song. You could have the song "Killers" be about any other typical Iron Maiden subject matter. But it is, in fact, one of the main forms of sort of glorified. If Maiden's thing eventually they realize their niche is heroic violence, one of their earliest heroic masks is the serial killer.
Hmm.
So
I mean, that's
that's
that's kind
it.
of what Eddie is in his like original incarnation.
Yeah. And it's a bit of a weird misdirect for Maiden, but it was I was never interested in Maiden as a kid because of that. But
Hmm.
like it's I was just like, who the fuck is this ugly guy? Why won't this ugly zombie man go away? But it was yeah. Anyway, it is. I guess that all goes to say, like, as much as a certain kind of metal guy might want to poo-poo, say, Sodos, um, even though it's a very different take on it, it does have something to do with a lot of the tropes that we all take for granted.
Hmm.
And it's a way of revisiting those ideas and going to the source in a way that metal bands don't.
Yeah, agreed. So I know that you have to get off shortly. Do we want to just do like 15 minutes of Q&A in case anyone wants anything?
Yeah, we may as well. I think, yeah, I'm fine to go another like 12 minutes if we want to cut
Yeah,
off
yeah,
around
we'll
10.
we'll run to 10.
And
Cool. So yeah, it's I am very much looking forward now that I'm done with the stuff on total abuse. I'm really looking forward to getting into the proxy books, which is sort of where Sotos really starts for me, and where the the ideas get a lot more complex, and you get to see him evolve as a writer into the direction that I'm much more interested in, which is still really extreme and prurient, but also very, very introspective. And he has a much more complicated relationship with the material that he's talking about than is suggested in the early stuff.
All right, cool. Well, I look forward to discussing that with you after you got it done.
Yeah, we'll do another when I get the proxy books done 3 years from now or something. So.
Yeah, you got to take a break for now, right?
Yeah. Anybody in the chat, if you've got any quick questions you want to ask before we sign off, you feel free. Let me take a look at what Horror Geek's been saying. Let's see. So he was talking about how the 2000s work has a big focus on the decline of the degenerate gay cruising brought on by the Bush administration and later Grindr and stuff. Yeah, Sotos is interested in the idea of the cruising spots as being their own kind of perverse community spaces that disappear as a result of both legal changes and technological mediation of sexual interaction, which is very interesting. And Horror Geek also says, it's interesting to see how Sotos' writing changes as pornography itself is changed by the internet. And yes, that gets really interesting when you start getting into the mid-2000s. Podcasting in the woodshop? No, one of my neighbors just decided it's time to start leaf blowing and shit at almost 10 o'clock at night because I live in the deep south and that's what people do here. Okay, we got a fresh question. Machinic Assemblage says, "When's TBMG's Neofolk episode coming?" You see, you fucked yourself now, buddy. Now people are gonna start asking for it.
Oh, come on. Machinic Assemblage. I might have said this to you in a comment at some point, but do you know that your PFP is it's actually behind the Francis Bacon meat locker is actually behind me on the wall.
Oh, nice.
Francis, known to the rude masses as Francis Bacon's meat locker painting, and known to the few, the true and the proud, as the cover of the first Integrity record. Those who fear tomorrow. So nice job with that. But when's my Neofolk episode coming? I don't fucking know. And I am not making any promises. I do think if I do a solo thing, it's the next thing I will do. But I have, I'm generally, I am trying to continue doing Terminus while preventing burnout. So which is just something I'm vulnerable to if I keep at something for long enough. I will probably be doing, we'll be doing more informal episodes that will be probably just as dense, but I'll be shooting from the hip more, which will be refreshing. And yeah, that may free up some mental and spiritual energy for solo work, in which case it's the first thing I'll do. But yeah, no timeline for it. And I think it's the kind of thing that will only happen if there's not an expectation, a too concrete an expectation. And I will say though that there are notes for it already. It's not purely abstract.
Okay,
at this
cool.
point. I have ideas of things I would do. And it is something I would enjoy doing. I do not turn a blind eye to your requests. And in fact, I'm rather flattered. In fact, I'm very flattered by the interest, so thank you. That's one last thing I wanted to say. I don't know if I have anything to... Oh, it goes with Horror Geek's question. Basically, our method with music criticism is shockingly removed from the physical artifact. And the dark secret is that we both have bought hard copy on and off over the years at various points when we've had the money and wherewithal to do so, but neither of us are huge hard copy collectors. obviously we monetarily support the scene in whatever ways we can, blah blah blah. But go to the show, buy a shirt. But I am neither of us are record geeks, and a lot of the music we review is just stuff we hear online. And so it's interesting that the death metal guy has done this very like physical media based project for these books. And on that note, how many of these books do you have, and have you ordered the new one?
So, I will get to that real quick. I want to answer Sleepy. He asked, is there anything in cinema that you feel is trying to approach art the way Sotos does? Honestly, man, I'd say not really. I think that Sotos really lives in the written word. I think that you know what would happen if you tried to do something in cinema that was like Sotos? You would have a similar difference between Crash by J.G. Ballard, the movie versus the book, where the book really thrives off of its coldness, and the movie still has a lot of coldness, but just by virtue of having people talking and having a soundtrack, it makes it much warmer. They're both great, but they're fundamentally different, and I think something similar would happen with Sotos. How many of his books do I physically have? Let me think and rattle them off. At this point, there's only a few that I don't have. So I've got Total Abuse. I have a bootleg of Proxy. But within Proxy, I have real physical copies of Index and Lazy. I have Selfish Little as a hardcover, actually, which is pretty cool. I have Comfort and Critique. I have Obviates, which includes Predicate and Show Adult. I have... I've got Lionel Mons, Peter Sotos. I've got Key McFarlane. I've got Mine. I'm not doing them in order right now. And I've got Ingratitude, and I have pre-ordered a copy of Instead Indices, the new one. The only ones that I don't have are, as far as like mainline Sotos work, is like Lordotics, Desistance, and Home. Lordotics is really the one that I'm looking for right now, but that's just such a bitch to find. And I would also really like to get individual physical copies of Special and Tick, if I can find them at a reasonable price. So yeah, I've got most of the significant catalog. I don't care about like collecting zines with interviews and shit. I just want the books. I feel like Sotos' writing and editing got more cut up and disjointed with the hardware he used, typewriter to word processor to computer, plus the same likely goes for the varying sources and media available to him. Yeah, I think that that's fair. I think that Sotos, when he had to do all of this stuff by just getting newspaper clippings and going to the library, it created naturally a very different kind of writing. But with the expansion of the media landscape and the access to like digital news and like archives of images and newspaper clippings and stuff, it really changes things up a lot. The amount of information he's able to get on these cases is so much more vast than it used to be. Yeah, I think that probably did have an effect on it. Horror Geek said, someone kind of tried, I think he's saying in terms of like trying to create like a film version of Sotos, and the server asked for the Index screenplay. No, I have said, I saw that a while back, because I know that that's in, I saw it when someone linked me to a drive including it, as well as, is that in Timeless? Is that just whole thing included in that zine? That's what it seems to originate from. It's interesting, but like obviously it just feels completely different from the book. Like you can't make a movie out of the book. So any treatment that you gave it would necessarily be radically different. I'm not saying that would be like not worthwhile to try, but I think whatever you got would just be a very different animal from what you get on the page. So,
I've got a couple. Or do you have one you were trying to get
Oh,
to?
no, go ahead.
Destruction Ritual says we need a Black Metal Invita Armada podcast. guess what? I was suggesting to the death metal guy that if we do an episode after the, to follow up on the Danzig Steel one, we could probably do that one. I do have a BMA IA listicle type review in me, and I think we could do that pretty quick.
Yeah,
Obviously, for
I'd like
new
to do
episodes, we will still do the sampling and rigorous analysis method. When I said shoot from the hip, I didn't mean just bullshitting. We'll still do sampling and analysis. I just mean like not writing a script, because writing a script for the Danzig Steel thing, and I thought I wasn't doing enough to prepare, so I wrote a real script for that, and I did that fucking massive image collage for the first one. Just never again, man. At least not for a while. I can't make that the new standard Terminus episode. It's just not yeah, if they're all like that, they'll never happen. So I think we're gonna go radically the other way and just do it kind of like at the beginning, where we just have the samples and then we talk about them. Yeah, and it will go beyond BMIA too, because obviously there's a lot of Italian spite influenced bands that were not part of that circle. So, you'll get your, we won't name them all.
Yeah.
Yeah, Frangar is very cool. We've got some Frangar appreciators in the Discord. Other thing, somebody disgorging asked me, has BMG ever read any Sotos? Haven't heard much of his thoughts on the matter. No, never have. And listening to these episodes have convinced me that I have no interest in it at all.
I did think about giving you my copy of Index, since I have a copy of Proxy, but then I thought about it, and it's like, no, like he's no, like that's not for you. Like, not even in like a denigrating way.
No,
it's just like, yeah, this is like a totally me thing.
Like, honestly, like as I was listening to the first episode, the literary and some of those passages, it is interesting writing often, right? Some of those T-boning, the fragmented style, the repetition, the T-boning, it's all pretty interesting. And there was a moment when I was like, damn, death metal guy's really killing it with this analysis. There really is something artistic here. And you go on and you listen to more of it, and you're like, this is just gross, man. I don't want to, if Sotos is a case in point of saying, if you don't, basically one of the key messages is, if you don't like this stuff, don't spend your time around it.
Yes.
And I was just like, yeah, you know what? I think I don't want to spend my time around this stuff. So I will listen to more of the Terminus episodes. Yeah, who knows? Maybe eventually I will, but I won't. I think I have no interest in it.
You're good, dude. Basically. You're good.
Yeah.
So I think I like that as a note to end on. That's pretty good. Yeah. So, all right, guys. Thank you all for listening to me spurg out. Thanks to the guys from Terminus. Thanks to the guys from the Sotos server that popped in. It's been a pleasure. I cannot give you a time frame on the next book episode. I have so many writing projects that I'm doing concurrently. But if you want to keep abreast of things, follow us here on YouTube, join the Discord, follow me on Substack at Hideous Recollection, and you will get to see all of the fun and occasionally horrible projects that we are working on. So thank you all so much for listening, and we will